be talking about Afrofuturism, Afrocentricity, Black Speculative Arts, and Sinners, right? The movie of the year. Like, there's no question that Sinners is the movie of the year. So we're going to be talking about that. And we're going to be talking about it with one of my favorite people who I'm going to introduce to you right now. Dr. Reynaldo Anderson currently serves as Associate Professor in Africology and African American Studies at Temple University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. That is where I met him. Shout out to Africology. He is currently the executive director and co-founder of the Black Speculative Arts Movement, an international network of artists, intellectuals, creatives, and activists. He is the co-editor of the following anthologies and journals: Afrofuturism 2.0, The Rise of Astro-Blackness and the Speculative Arts Movement. Read that, please. Black Futurity, Art and Design. You have Cosmic Underground, a grimoire of Black speculative discontent, Black Lives, Black Politics, Black Futures, a special issue of TOPIA, Canadian Journal of Cultural Studies, and When is Wakanda, Afrofuturism and Dark Speculative Futurity. Okay, that is in the Journal of Future Studies. Reynaldo served as a member of the Curatorial Council for Carnegie Hall's Afrofuturism Festival in 2022. He was recognized by the National Council of Black Studies with the 2025 Fannie Lou Hamer Kwame Nkrumah Award for Academic Leadership and Service in the African World, and is the author of the forthcoming book, Afrofuturism and the World Order, with Ohio State Press. This is his second year with Sankofa Summer School. And I also just want to mention that if you go to the National Museum of African American History and Culture, you might also see some of his work there too. So I'm going to bring this good brother to the stage. And let me just tell you, that was a very limited bio for our website, because this man got books and accolades and articles and research and presentations, and he's been all around the world. He is one of our foremost leaders, thought leaders when it comes to Afrofuturism, and I am going to let him take it away. Just so you all know, we were having some technical issues, so I'm going to be running his slides, so you're going to hear him say slide. Usually people do it on their own, but I'm going to assist today, but it should be just fine, and I will let you take it away.
Okay. Oh, man, and I'm so happy to have the opportunity to talk to Sankofa Summer School. The contemporary Afrofuturist movement started out as grassroots. This reminds me of one of my first presentations was in the basement of a church in North St. Louis to about 6 or 7 people. And just to see how the movement has grown over the last dozen years is amazing, where 10 years ago, there weren't even 10 people that you could really talk to about this stuff, but now it's in the thousands. And it's, I think, getting ready to go through another shift. I think what the Panther movie did in 2018, the Sinners movie is taking on a similar resonance in 2025, yet somewhat different than what the Marvel put out in 2018. And with that, I'd like to go on and get started, and let's get going. Slide, please. History of Black speculative thought. A lot of the ideas, and I'll use Black speculative thought and Afrofuturism interchangeably. And the reason that I use Black speculative thought is because these ideas were going on long before the word Afrofuturism was coined in the 1990s. So you're seeing it's kind of the ideas and cultural ways of looking at the world that survived the Middle Passage. And it is often could be considered a reclamation project, but it honors ideas from antiquity that you might find in Kemet. It honors ideas from the Congo region or basin of West Africa, or what they would call the Gulf of Guinea, where many of our ancestors came, or from West Africa, as you see in the picture there with the Dogon mask. And so these ideas come from what philosophically could be called a geography of reason, talking about Africa. The same way for people of European descent, say they draw upon all this stuff out of Europe, going back to Greece. It is ethical and logical for us to talk about an African geography of reason when we're building our ideas, recognizing where this DNA that we carried across the water with us. Next slide, please. All right. Now, Black speculative praxis, as we understand it today, in the 18th, 19th century, was connected with two traditions that had strong roots in the African American community: Prince Hall Freemasonry and the Conjur woman Freemasonry. One of the things that I like about giving this recognition, Martin Delany, who for some people is known as the father of Black nationalism, was also heavily involved with Prince Hall Freemasonry and was one of the first Americans to deal with mejuneture in terms of debating other white scholars around the concept of mejuneture. Also, the Conjur woman tradition that was strong in the community for centuries in the Black American community. And there were other Black speculative practices throughout the Western Hemisphere, depending on which region you're in. Brazil, they had Candomblé. Haiti, or San Domingo had Vodun. And there are Obey in Jamaica. So these traditions often overlapped in their thinking with each other in terms of how they were institutionalized and expressed. And Martin Delany also puts out one of the earliest Black speculative literary works tied to what we call the Black speculative literary tradition with his book, The Hut, which dealt with a slave revolution. Next slide, please. Now, the background of what we would call contemporary or Black speculative thought in Afrofuturism really revolves around people out of these four pictures here. In the 90s, early 90s, a guy named Mark Derry, he's in a picture with us. We're having lunch with him in Harlem a couple years ago, talking about where he first thinks about this stuff. And he was in dialogue with the science fiction writer Sam Delaney, who used to teach at Temple, retired some years ago, Greg Tate, and Trish Rose. Greg Tate had written for The Village Voice. It's still one of the best literary expressions of hip hop, along with some other people, but I really like his flair in terms of how he expresses it. And then Trisha Rose, who was one of the early pioneers of women writing about hip hop. And in conversation with them, talking about this idea, Mark talks about, after being in dialogue with these Black intellectuals in Manhattan, thinking about this word in relation to Silicon Valley, talking about this white techno-futurist thing, and then thinking about how is Black culture going to respond to this immersion of all this technology that's coming out of Silicon Valley at the time. And that's when he had this favorite quote that he talked about: how does this community whose past has been rubbed out to a certain extent and energies have been devoted to survival, fashion, a compelling future? Well, he was unaware of the Black speculative tradition, and that's why, to his own chagrin, he talked about mistake, because he just didn't know about it. He was unaware of Black studies and all of these other people that we were talking about even then. And at the theme then, it was primarily around music, comics, science fiction at the time. It had a very limited, narrow discussion of it, until people like Alondra Nelson would come out with social text some years later to expand on it. Next slide, please. However, at the same time, and before Derry was even coining the phrase, they had at Temple University what was called the Temple Circle at that time, a group of academics here at Temple at the beginning and founding of its African American Studies program. And in these books, they're dealing with the same type of ideas Derry's dealing with in terms of space and time, African American culture, aesthetics, music, time and space. And in the book, The African Centered Perspective of History, the first graduate director of Temple, C.T. Keto, a South African, talks about the Africana tradition in relation to the future. He talks about, as a futurologist, he or she or they can have a time map to look beyond the next century. So he's talking about futurology in relation to Black studies a year or two before Derry even comes out and coins the term. So when I hear people talk about, ooh, Afrofuturism, Mark Derry, I was like, well, the Temple Circle was actually grasping and dealing with it before Derry publishes that famous piece. But then if you all are old enough to remember, a lot of these books that came out in Black Studies 30 plus years ago were not promoted by the mainstream press. So if you were not in Black Studies, you didn't even know these books existed. That's why I always refer to people, say, hey, you need to go and check out what they put out from between 87 and 93, which forms a bedrock of the Black Studies tradition that we would later build into contemporary Afrofuturism. Next slide, please. So what is Afrofuturism, or what we call 2.0? We just say it's contemporary Afrofuturism is how people of African descent locate themselves in time and space with agency. And its bedrock three pillars is built around is Afrocentricity, which deals with location and cultural agency, Afrofuturism, and Pan-Africanism. Sometimes I tell people Pan-Africanism is literally like the foreign policy of Black folks, or we're talking about global Africa. So Afrocentricity and Afrofuturism goes together like peanut butter and jelly. Without Afrocentricity, contemporary Afrofuturism doesn't really work in the interest of people of African descent. And when you're talking about the Pan-Africanism piece, Afrofuturism is going to look different depending on which country in the diaspora you're in. In Brazil, they have Afrofuturismo. Or to borrow Pamela Ficimo Sundstrom's work, who influences my own way of thinking about it, she is the African creative scholar who came up with the term African Futurism, which he publishes in 2013 as a critique on Afrofuturism, talking about the mythopoetics and mythos of continental African agency and creativity in dialogue with the diaspora. And it includes distinctions such as the impact of social media, science and technological advances, and a changing geopolitical landscape as a key distinction. So contemporary Afrofuturism is transnational, Pan-African, and an emerging technocultural social philosophy. And other arguments that you can get into, as Black Studies scholars know, Afrocentricity is not an inversion of Eurocentric thought. Eurocentric is really dealing with the white concept of universalism, thinking that their ideas are attributable to the entire humanity. Afrocentricity does not make those claims that Eurocentric scholars make. Next slide, please. 5 dimensions of contemporary Afrofuturism. Metaphysics, when we're talking about African spirituality, all of those traditions, whether it's hoodoo, vodou, Kadamble, and others, or what they practice on the continent. Aesthetics, my favorite, even though people talk about Sun Ra in terms of his aesthetics, I like the rapper Ciroc is my favorite, even though some people are more for Janelle Monáe. My favorite amongst the women rappers out there that are Afrofuturistic is Ciroc. You have theoretical and applied sciences. Going all the way back in an African-American context, you talk about Benjamin Banneker in terms of his astrotheology and in his famous debate with Thomas Jefferson. You have it in architecture, or you have it in Philly native Rashida Phillips and the work she did with Black quantum futurism in terms of time and space in relation to urban conditions, urban living conditions of Black folks. And I mean, you can even deal with it in terms of military science, applied sciences, theoretical, and elsewhere. Social sciences, there's where Afrocentricity comes in as a part of it. And then the programmatic spaces in terms of speculative symposiums, when you see some of the Black women futurist meetings, or our own group, the Black Speculative Arts Movement, or other conferences devoted to the topic. But those are the general 5 dimensions of the movement that you'll see in different regions of the world coming around those concepts. Next slide, please. Roots, Conjur, and Hoodoo, the first African-American religion. And I say that, and it'll take you to the website if you pull it up. The large attempt to try and convert people of African descent in North America to Christianity really does not happen until the late 18th century. So what were they doing before? We've been over here since the 1600s. So what were we doing before this attempt to convert us? They were doing their own version of the Africanist religion expression. Some people might call it slave religion. They had different names for it. But so for almost half of our existence in this hemisphere, we weren't practicing Christianity at all. I mean, some people call them hush harbors, other things, forms of expression we were doing, but you don't really, and that's why you don't see the emergence of the Black church until after the American Revolution, with the roots and the beginnings of Black civic institutions such as the Masonic Lodge or the AME Church. Prince Hall and the founder of the AME Church, Richard Allen, knew each other, and there used to be a saying that to be a leader in the AME Church, if you were a bishop or a leader, you had to be a Prince Hall Mason, as well as some of these other traditions which were incorporated into those institutional expressions, into many of the early creations of Black civic society in America at the time. Next slide, please. Oh, I always call ancestral intelligence, African spirit cosmology, the first AI. So by the late 19th century, after the Civil War, you have some important characters, and some of them you see them come up in the movie centers. You have Isaiah Montgomery, the founder of Mount Bayou, Mississippi, an all-Black town in northern Mississippi that you hear mentioned in the movie. Isaiah Montgomery was a former enslaved African who was also a Black Methodist, who was also friendly with many of the people that helped build this all-Black township. There was a time in its history for Mount Bayou that the only white person they might ever see is the mailman coming through. This was that period of racial uplift where Black people wanted to build their own thing. The explosion of free Black townships after the Civil War that spread throughout different regions of the country. From that same region of Mississippi, you have Robert Johnson, bluesman, who famously was in the tales have it that he learned the blues from the devil at the crossroads, which is just a fictitious expression of it, the blues. Roots of it there in the Delta, the crossroads. It's interesting when you drive past or through that region of Mississippi, northern Mississippi, because this is the region we're talking about. It still feels like you go back in time when you're driving down some of those narrow roads. And sometimes I remember I would think about what was on Robert Johnson's mind coming off the plantations, creating that music. And so then the music is also in relation to, in conversation with the faith. In the lower portion of the picture, you see that man around those roots symbols and stuff that he's holding. That is Bishop Charles Mason, the founder of the Church of God in Christ from Mississippi, even though they have their headquarters there in Memphis. But most people know that Memphis is kind of like the capital of Mississippi, not Jackson. But Charles Mason also, as a lot of biblical scholars and theological scholars know, that what he's doing, and he's helping to create the Pentecostal movement, is really trying to keep alive what he would think of as African spirit cosmology in relation to Christianity. And Pentecostalism is, and when you think about it like that, created here in this country, blues, Pentecostalism are unique African-American creations that travel the world, okay, that come right out of Mississippi, that Delta region that where hoodoo is being practiced, as well as this idea of Black independence that you hear in the movie where one of the characters talks about for us, by us. So that Mississippi region contained the seeds of a lot of concepts and ideas that were a strong driving force in Black American culture, late 19th, early 20th century. Now, the woman there that's in the middle of the picture is actually my ancestor, Rebecca Taylor. She was born in 1843 in the southern part of the state, probably about maybe 100 miles away from going around Copiah County, Mississippi. 1843, she sees the defeat of the Confederate Army by Ulysses S. Grant in Vicksburg, as they're crushing the Confederate Army, scattering them through Mississippi, and the slaves are not helping. They're actually, through their strikes, kind of helping to starve the Confederate army out by not helping them as the Union Army is chasing them. And I remember my Uncle Son, and she lives, great-great-grandma Rebecca lives until 1945. So she doesn't pass away until she's in her late 90s. And Uncle Son, who, as a young man born in 1950, who knew her and told me at our family reunion outside of Memphis in the early 90s before he passed away, that she had a saying. She talks about when freedom came amongst the Black folk, like freedom was a living thing. And that's why I sometimes get in debates with some of my scholar friends that Black folk didn't use the word liberation, they used the word freedom. Liberation was something that some leftist people tried to introduce into our narrative, but our ancestors used the word freedom and she talked about it as a living thing that comes amongst the Black people. And then to the lower right-hand corner there, you see the picture. That is a picture of Russ College, which was and it's still there today. Russ College, a historically Black college near Mount Bayou, Mississippi, or Hollis Springs, which they, along with Mount Bayou, you see this drive for Black people to have self-contained units to deal with a racist white segregationist society, and so you have all these components coming on there. And one thing, every time I look at Grandma Rebecca's picture, you can tell she is a woman not to be played with, and she was one of those kind of big hat wearing sisters. And she was also a woman who was I can't think of the word. She was a midwife. She delivered several hundred babies throughout the region of Mississippi that she worked in. And it is from this side of the family that when I was a young boy in the 70s, I first heard the word haint. And I didn't know what that was. I thought that was like some bad English or something like that. And I asked my mother, what is grandmama talking about? And she said, oh, she's talking about ghosts. And I was like, oh, so she clarified that for me as a young kid. And so our generation of a lot of the people in the contemporary Afrofuturist movements, like myself, John Jennings, I think Natasha Womack, Stacey Robinson, our families are from the South. Okay, and so it's some of the Gen Xers, we're the last one who really remember some of these people who were deeply involved with those traditions as kids in the 70s, at the same time that the sounds of Earth, Wind, and Fire, the Atari games, some Japanese anime that kind of influences what we think of now. And we would later then become comfortable with the word Afrofuturism. But the way we think about Black speculative thought is very much influenced by these people that are in the slide that you're looking at, in terms of how they brought together music, faith, institutional development, and communities of mutual aid that were around for a long, long time. Next slide, please. Oh, the Black Belt Thesis. Myself and Clint Fluker wrote a piece talking about Afrofuturism and the Black Belt Thesis, and hopefully you all got a chance to read the article by Scott Heath I provided for you all to read. We're arguing that the roots of Afrofuturism in America come from the Black Belt. If you look at that top point there, starting in East Texas, from Arkansas all the way over to the West Coast, You get, okay, there in the middle, Alabama, that's where Sun Ra comes from. In Georgia, Elijah Muhammad creates the Nation of Islam. Over there in Arkansas, you get Henry Dumas. And so you get a lot of these people that take this Black speculative tradition coming out of the late 19th century that they used to keep in Prince Hall lodges, hoodoo, conjure, and it goes north, and then it's transmuted or transforms once it hits Chicago, Detroit, and the north, and along with the music. But a lot of it comes out of the Delta and the Black Belt. And so, and then in the lower picture there, you see the brothers there, Smoke and Stack. They're influenced by the North, they end up becoming a part of the beginnings of organized crime in America, which was influenced by the Irish and Italians. And each one of them has a style that reflects that. I believe it's Smoke that wears the Irish thing with the hat that he had and attire. So you could tell maybe he deals with the Irish people in organized crime. And then Stack, who's dressed with the hat, reflected much more the Italian aesthetic in organized crime. And plus they were twins. They were probably easier to fool people because of their looks. But then Smoke, as you can see, even though he had gone to war, was in organized crime, still wears the mojo piece that the woman he was in love with represented there in the picture, whose name, I don't know why it escapes me at the moment. So you see the politics of a lot of this stuff show up in the film, whether it's the Irish vampire Remick and the concept of passing, who was Stack's love interest in terms of the color line, and all of this comes together in that movie, in this Black Belt and this nation of hoodoo, and it gets expressed brilliantly and succinctly in a scene that we're going to look at. That please turn the scene on, where you see this location and space and time and how it moves.
I've been hearing about this one particular young man all day. Supposed to be a bad blues man. Preacher boy, where you at? Come on here, man. My little cousin, y'all. Watch this. Hold up. Tell me who you are. Where you from?
I'm Sammy Moore. I'm a sharecropper from Sunflower Plantation. They call me Preacher Boy, counting my daddy being the pastor. I wrote this song for him. Something I've been wanting to tell you.